Earlier this year, at a meeting in Erbil, the capital of Iraqi Kurdistan, 5 very different opposition groups from Iranian Kurdistan did something truly extraordinary. They united. A few days after this, a 6th major Iranian Kurdish group also joined the new alliance, known as the Coalition of Political Forces in Iranian Kurdistan. This new organization includes nearly every major party from Iran's Kurdish opposition, so now, with some legitimacy, it can claim to speak for all of Iran's Kurdish people. Considering how fractured Iran's wider opposition is, this move to unity among Kurdish opposition groups is remarkable. It was also remarkably well timed, because just a few days later, an orange man in a baseball cap standing in front of a black curtain announced he was launching a war against Iran. He also encouraged the Iranian people to rise up and overthrow the government, and a few days after this, he openly flirted with the idea of arming Iranian Kurdish militias, known as the Peshmerga, with the hopes that they could jumpstart the regime change he was calling for. President Trump has since switched his focus to killing Iran's people rather than helping them free themselves, and his plan to arm the Peshmerga evaporated shortly after it was announced. But Iran's Kurdish opposition remains hopeful about the opportunities this newly announced coalition could bring, both to Iran as a whole and to the land that Iran's Kurds call Rojhelat. Stay tuned, I'll explain. Hi everyone, I'm Fredom Rockwell, and in this video we're going to be discussing the newly formed Coalition of Political Forces in Iranian Kurdistan, who the members of this group are, and how it could possibly become an important player in Iran's future. As always, my goal in this video will be to provide information. Just because I mention a group or a movement in this video, please do not take that as an endorsement of anything or any particular movement or goal. Okay, so let's take a step back for a moment and discuss who exactly are the Kurdish people, and what and where is Kurdistan? The estimated 30 to 45 million Kurdish people in the world today have a history that dates back at least 1,000 years, and possibly far longer, but they've never had their own nation state, with one possible short-lived exception. I'll get to that in a moment. Instead, the Kurds are divided across 4 different countries: Syria, Turkey, Iraq, and Iran. These regions are often labeled North, South, East, and West Kurdistan, so you'll see this region referred to both as Iranian Kurdistan and East Kurdistan, but for the rest of this video, I'm going to use the name that the Kurdish people use themselves: Rojhelat. Iran's Kurds are sometimes referred to as the Forgotten Kurds because over the last few decades, they've received a lot less international attention than other Kurdish groups. Turkey's Kurdish Workers' Party famously engaged in a guerrilla campaign that lasted for decades. The Kurds in northern Iraq unilaterally founded their own autonomous region in 1991, which is still going today. I made a video about this if you'd like to check it out. Syria's Kurds also established their own autonomous zone, commonly referred to as Rojava, during the Syrian civil war. But until relatively recently, international media rarely reported on anything or anyone from Rojhelat. That is, until 2022, when the world heard the news that a Kurdish woman named Jina Amini was killed by Iran's morality police. She wasn't following the state-mandated dress code for women. Also known by her official Persian first name, Masa, Amini's death sparked immediate protests that spread rapidly across Iran. Tens of thousands of protesters were arrested, and at least 7 of these people, maybe more, have been executed. The fact that Amini was part of Iran's Kurdish minority is something which is not always reported in media coverage, but it's extremely relevant. Iran's government arrests and kills a lot of Iranian citizens, but its crackdowns on free thinking and individualism are focused especially on Kurdish people. Despite accounting for as little as 10% of Iran's total population, a UN report from 2019 found that almost half of Iran's political prisoners are Kurdish. And, like Amini, it's Kurdish women in particular that the regime often targets. For example, Urusha Maradi was arrested in 2023 for being a member of a Kurdish women rights movement known as KJAR. She was convicted and has been sentenced to death. Zeynab Jalalian was arrested in 2008 for being a member of a group called the Kurdish Free Life Party, something she denies. Jalalian, who has been in prison longer than any other Iranian political prisoner, was convicted and has also been sentenced to death. And these are just two high-profile examples of many. As you almost certainly know, the brutality of the Iranian regime recently accelerated. When much larger protests erupted in late 2025, instead of being content with arresting tens of thousands, as it did during the protest following Amini's murder, this time it killed tens of thousands. It was against this backdrop, with an unknowable number of Kurdish men and women recently murdered, that the final negotiations to create the new coalition took place. I say final negotiations because we know now that 7 different prominent Kurdish groups began meeting secretly in early 2025 in talks managed by an organization called the Dialogue Center for Cooperation among the Parties of Iranian Kurdistan. Just getting these different parties, which include Social Democrats, Social Conservatives, Marxist-Leninists, and Libertarian Socialists, just getting them to come together and have a discussion was no doubt a huge accomplishment. These parties all work towards the liberation of Rojhelat, but I don't think that they naturally agree on virtually anything else. They probably don't even agree on what it means for Rojhelat to be liberated. But the groups kept meeting, slowly putting aside their differences, and when news of thousands of protesters being slaughtered emerged, this group was ready to flex its muscles for the first time. On January 6, this collection of Iranian Kurdish groups collectively called for a general strike to take place 2 days later. This call worked. The strike was observed in towns spread across Rojhelat, totally spooking Iran's leadership. United, Iran's Kurdish opposition was a force to be reckoned with. During the weeks that followed, this group, 6 out of the 7, went much, much further than just calling for a general strike, and formed the coalition. To understand how difficult a step this must have been, let's have a look at the histories and ideologies of these different groups. The oldest and most politically mainstream party to take part in the Erbil talks was the Democratic Party of Iranian Kurdistan, known as the PDKI. It was founded in 1945, and it claims credit for establishing a short-lived Kurdish state called the Republic of Mahabad, formed during the chaotic period at the end of World War II, when the Soviet Union occupied northern Iran. The Republic of Mahabad is widely considered to have been a Soviet client state, and the best evidence for this is that it collapsed as soon as the Soviet army withdrew from Iran in late 1946. Since then, the PDKI has mostly been based in Iraqi Kurdistan, where it has launched regular attacks against the Iranian government. Politically, it is a social democratic party which supports the creation of an autonomous Kurdistan inside a secular federal Iran. It is also the Iranian Kurdish Party and the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization, the UNPO. Next, we're going to discuss a group of parties that all descend from the Organization of Revolutionary Toilers, which is generally referred to by the Kurdish word for organization, Komala. The original Komala is rooted in Marxist-Leninist movements from the 1960s and 70s, becoming prominent during Iran's 1979 revolution. Today, there are several factions of that original Komala movement, which include the Komala Party of Iranian Kurdistan, the Komala Party of Toilers, and the Komala Communist Party. Actually, it's really hard to tell these groups apart, and I may have made a mistake in that part. They all use virtually the same name and same logos. So forgive me if I've gotten that a bit wrong. Basically, all 3 of these factions took part in the talks in Erbil, but only 2 of them signed the agreement to join the coalition. The Party of Komala Toilers signed on the first day, and then the Komala Party of Iranian Kurdistan, which I think is the largest of these groups, joined a few days afterwards. The Komala Communist Party decided not to join, citing differences over how the Peshmerga would be organized. In true Marxist fashion, the different Komala factions are less nationalist than other Kurdish parties and also support autonomy for Rojhelat as part of a secular, federal Iran rather than independence. The Kurdistan Struggle Organization of Iran, known more commonly as Khabat, was founded in 1980 by Sheikh Jalal Hosseini, a traditional Kurdish religious leader. Unlike Ayatollah Khomeini and the other Shia Muslim clerics who seized power to form the Islamic Republic, most Kurds in Iran are Sunni Muslims, and Khabat was set up as a Sunni Islamist alternative to the more radical and secular Komala and DPKI. Over time, however, Khabat dropped its focus on Islam and currently positions itself as secularist and nationalist. Its website states that religion must be separate from government and that Rojhelat should have autonomy as part of a democratic and parliamentary Iranian framework. Next, we have the Kurdistan Freedom Party, known by its Kurdish initials as the PAK, which was founded in 1991. The PAK also started as a Marxist-Leninist party, but today is mostly known for its unwavering demand for Kurdistan to be independent, not part of a federal Iran. And lastly, there is the Kurdistan Free Life Party, or PJAK, which is part of the broader network of parties that follow the ideology of the imprisoned Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan. Known as Democratic Confederalism, Öcalan's ideology is both fascinating and also so radically different from other political ideologies that I'm going to save this explanation for another video. But it should be pointed out that the PJAK is part of a pan-Kurdish movement. Öcalan's ideology of self-defense, cooperative economics, feminism, and libertarian socialism underpins not just the PJAK, but also Turkey's Kurdish Workers' Party and the entire administration of Rojava in Syria. So that's the coalition. The long-established PDKI, two rival factions of the leftist Komala party, the conservative group known as Khabat, the hardcore independence-focused PAK, and the militant communitarians of PJAK. For these groups to come to any sort of agreement would be a major accomplishment. For them to take the next step and agree a framework for governing themselves and a future liberated Rojhelat, well, that would be absolutely incredible. And at least according to what they're saying in public, that's what they've actually done. According to this statement published by Rojhelat.info, the coalition has agreed, among other things, to work together for the liberation of Rojhelat, to establish a joint command for the Peshmerga, to create a unified diplomatic office, to centrally administer all liberated areas in Rojhelat, to hold democratic elections in Rojhelat after its liberation, and to support democracy across all of Iran. Let's unpack this for just a moment. We can't know for sure if the coalition's membership will be able to stay united over time. The proof of that will be, as they say, in the pudding. But if this plan is actually implemented, it could make Iran's Kurdish opposition a serious player in Iran's future. Here's why. Each member of the coalition has its own military wing, the groups I've been referring to previously as the Peshmerga. The total numbers are not large, an estimated 5,000 to 10,000 fighters, but these are veteran soldiers, many of whom worked with the US forces to defeat the Islamic State. United, well-organized, and motivated, even only 5,000 Peshmerga could be highly effective in the right conditions. Also, if the coalition continues to speak together with one voice, it could tip the balance in what is one of the major fronts of this conflict: communications. To prevent ordinary Iranians from organizing themselves, the regime has reduced internet connectivity to almost nothing. A few people have Starlink or similar systems that bypass Iran's restricted internet, but these are highly illegal and can only be used sparingly. With such limited opportunities to speak to the people of Rojhelat, the coalition's ability to speak with a single, united voice, a single clear message, as it did with the general strike, could be incredibly important. If it stays united, the coalition also has the opportunity to foster that sort of almost impossible to define quasi-magical property known as legitimacy. In today's Islamic Republic of Iran, legitimacy is in short supply. This is why protests against the government keep erupting, and why some protesters want to give control of the government to a man from suburban Washington. By speaking for such a wide range of Kurdish political opinion, the coalition can claim to speak for all of Rojhelat. And that is how legitimacy starts. And if they can hold together, that legitimacy will grow stronger and stronger. Is the coalition about to cross over the border into Iran and start the liberation of Rojhelat? I honestly don't know. The internet blackout in Iran makes it almost impossible to know what's going on the ground anywhere in the country. And the coalition itself is understandably not broadcasting its current plans. President Trump says that he's going to withdraw from Iran one day and ramp up the war crimes the next day. It's impossible to know what's going to happen. But even if Trump does cut and run, I think the upheaval which he has started will continue to run for months, maybe years to come. In such an uncertain environment, the idea that an organized and unified coalition could enter Rojhelat and establish an autonomous area is something that is certainly possible. I wouldn't say it's a likely scenario at this point, but it's certainly not crazy talk. One thing that does sound crazy to me is the reaction to the coalition by Reza Pahlavi, the son of the deposed Shah, who is busy positioning himself as Iran's leader in waiting from his home in America. Instead of welcoming some much-needed cooperation among opposition groups, Pahlavi accused the coalition of being separatists. You'll have noticed that most of them are not calling for separation from Iran, but he accused them of being separatists, bent on breaking up Iran, and called on the Iranian army to defend the country against the coalition. Just a note here, Mr. Pahlavi is a private citizen who has spent most of the last few decades living in a suburb outside Washington, D.C. He doesn't have the authority to command an army. He doesn't even have an army. Now, you may have noticed that none of the major groups which I discussed earlier are monarchist. There's a reason for that. During his rule, the last Shah of Iran engaged in what Kurdish people say was ethnic cleansing. Pahlavi Jr. wants to be proclaimed as the leader of Iran's unified opposition, so he should be building bridges with Iran's Kurdish leaders, not continuing the bad blood from his father's regime. To me, this statement by Pahlavi calls his political judgment into serious question. Okay, so let's discuss for a moment what would happen if the coalition did successfully create an autonomous area in Rojhelat. Would that be a good thing? Obviously, for Iran's Kurds, it would be good to be governed by people who are not actively trying to kill them. Looking at the wider situation geopolitically, there are a lot more questions than answers, at least at the moment. How would an autonomous Rojhelat interact with the rest of Iran? How would it interact with Iraqi Kurdistan? How would Turkey react to a third autonomous Kurdish region? What about Iran's other ethnic minorities, the Azeris, the Baluchs, the Turkmen, the Awazi Arabs? Would they each get their own autonomous region? I could keep going, but I think it suffices to say that what happens in Rojhelat over the next few months and maybe years is going to be extremely important, not just for Iran, but for the rest of the world. Okay, that's my introduction to Iran's Kurdish politics. And I say introduction because I'm hoping to make more videos on this subject. While I was researching the video, I tried contacting all of the parties that I mentioned previously in the video, and I heard back from 3 of them, which is very exciting. I'm hoping to establish more contacts with these groups, learn more, and come back to you with more information. But if you like this video, go ahead and subscribe and give it a like. And yeah, that's it. So I'll see you guys in the next video.